Hey everybody, it's Neil here from Post to Post. Thank you so much for joining me for this video. I was reading online on a couple of rumor sites which I try and stay away from. I tend not to dive into the rumors too much, but I read one that was quite interesting because it does have a small amount of validity to it, I guess. It makes sense in a lot of different aspects, but it also doesn't make sense in some aspects as well. And that is Sidney Crosby going to the Montreal Canadiens from the Pittsburgh Penguins. So I'm not going to spend 40 minutes breaking this down into every single aspect because that's how complicated this kind of situation is between Pittsburgh, Sidney Crosby, Montreal Canadiens. It would take a lot of moving parts. These two teams would have to do quite a serious dance to make this happen. So I figured we'd break it down by logistics, finances, and emotion, and other connections, basically. So another rumor, just to kind of get this one out of the way, is that Marc Bergevin could possibly consider going to the Pittsburgh Penguins for some kind of GM or management role because, and I didn't know this so recently, he and Mario Lemieux are quite good friends, which now that I think of it does kind of make sense. But that feels odd to me, just in the sense that Marc Bergevin has been with the Montreal Canadiens for almost a decade. And the team currently, as I'm filming this in this year, is the best it's ever looked, honestly, probably in the last 25 years. Not just considering the last 10 or his tenure in Montreal so far, but in 25 years. It's been a long time since Montreal looked this good. There's been years where 2014, they looked good, but there was still a lot of holes in their lineup and stuff. 2010 was a bit of an exception. They came in as an underdog and maybe overperformed a little bit on emotion, or with emotion. Overperformed with the help of emotion, that's what I was trying to say. But the team looks really good this year. They're built well. Bergevin has made a lot of smart decisions in the offseason. So it would feel weird for him to leave the organization now when the team is in the best position it's ever been to win a Stanley Cup and go elsewhere and try and do the rebuild there. Because Pittsburgh is going through, call it a rebuild, call it a retool, call it whatever you want. I honestly don't really care. But the team is obviously going through some trials and tribulations, trying to figure some stuff out financially, roster-wise, and all that stuff. Financially as in cap situation and stuff. I don't mean like the team's going bankrupt. They're one of the most profitable teams in the NHL. They're not going anywhere. So Crosby's name has come up in this. And let's put the Bergevin thing to bed. I don't think that's happening anytime soon. If it does happen, we're talking maybe next year at the earliest. Bergevin's contract runs out soon, I believe. Maybe next year or the year after. So you never know what's going to happen. I think Bergevin's not going anywhere this year. That's not going to happen this year. But switching over to the Crosby thing, because Pittsburgh is potentially looking to ship out a couple of big names. There's the Letang conversation, there's the Malkin conversation, and all those rumors. And then there's the Crosby situation. That's what really interests me the most. Because, yeah, I know I'm wearing Pittsburgh Penguins merch here, but if you're new, I am a Canadiens fan. And I think it would be really cool to see Sidney Crosby as a Montreal Canadien. I don't believe that this is going to happen anytime soon, though, because of the things I mentioned before. Finances, logistics, and emotion. So financially, we have $8.7 million in cap leaving Pittsburgh and going to Montreal, who has, I think, just roughly over $1 million in cap currently. That means that at least $7.7 million needs to exit Montreal to be within the cap. So we're talking, some fairly substantial names in the lineup. Maybe a Jonathan Drouin, a Philip Deneau, Thomas Tatar potentially, but Montreal doesn't have a lot of options to really send out. They have options, but Philip Deneau would be a logical choice because he was offered money by Montreal. He declined it. I don't think there's a bad relationship between the Philip Deneau and the Canadiens, but things aren't looking really positive. It looks like Deneau could potentially test the market and go elsewhere, which is fine. That's his right. But shipping him out to Pittsburgh causes two problems. On the Montreal side, you're removing a pretty crucial roster player, and when the team is doing very well. And on the Pittsburgh side, the problem there is, this guy's a UFA, he could just leave us, so there's not really any value there from the Pittsburgh perspective. So on the Jonathan Drouin's perspective, Yeah, he might fit in pretty well in Pittsburgh and help that organization go through their transition and grow long term, which is great. But really, there's no roster player on Montreal that helps Pittsburgh right, not necessarily right away because they're not looking for a short term fix, but still, Montreal's not going to trade Suzuki. They're not going to trade Romanov. Kotkaniemi potentially, but still, Pittsburgh's going to want more. We're talking about Sidney Crosby here. So what I envision, if this trade did happen, is likely Philip Deneau as a throw-in, Jonathan Drouin, probably Cole Caulfield, Caden Primo, and potentially a pick, or maybe just one of those two, and then a couple of picks for Sidney Crosby. So I think Jonathan Drouin makes 5.5 and Philip Deneau is 3.3 or 3.4. So that should balance out financially going either way. But logistically, it kind of doesn't make sense from the Montreal perspective because really, honestly, maybe both sides, but from the Montreal perspective, kind of like with the Deneau situation specifically, you're removing Deneau and Drouin potentially in my makeup trade. Montreal's playing really well right now. You're removing two crucial parts from that lineup, from that solid lineup that they have right now, and that is a dangerous thing to do when the team is hot. So just from that perspective, I don't see this trade happening this year. If it does happen, maybe it happens in the offseason. Maybe Deneau is not involved because he goes elsewhere, and Montreal can't trade him because he's he's a free agent. So maybe it's someone else. Who knows? But so from a financial perspective, it can happen and it makes sense. From a logical standpoint, I don't think it makes sense short term. From an emotional standpoint, that's where it works the most for me. Sidney Crosby's father, I believe, was drafted by, I can't remember if it was Montreal or Quebec, but still there's a connection there. Crosby grew up as a Montreal Canadiens fan. That was his favorite team. I always envisioned Crosby actually not ending his career in Pittsburgh and playing probably at least 1 year in Montreal, maybe his final year. But the way things are going in Pittsburgh, it may force Crosby's hand to consider going to Montreal sooner rather than later. And I think Pittsburgh knows that. I think deep down inside, Sidney Crosby loves Pittsburgh, obviously, but deep down inside, he is a Montreal Canadiens fan. He's been his entire life, and I'm sure he'd like to wear that sweater and have that logo on his chest. So maybe the time is now, and by now I mean maybe next year. So I think Sidney Crosby. We can talk about McKinnon and McDavid and all these other amazing players in the league. I really do personally believe that Sidney Crosby is the best player in the NHL. I'm not a fan of Sidney Crosby. I'm not a Pittsburgh Penguins fan, but just as an all-encompassing player, defensively, offensively, just personality-wise, leadership, I think Crosby is the best player in the NHL. And I would love to have him on the Montreal Canadiens. I would love to see him in that sweater, but I'll go back to it not happening anytime soon. If it does happen, I think it happens next year, and I think Montreal would end up losing long term. They're giving up some pretty serious assets for some short-term gain. It increases their chance to win the Stanley Cup potentially if they don't do it this year, but I think long term it's a more risky decision. So that's where I kind of side on the topic of emotion. Obviously, Montreal Canadiens would love to see Sidney Crosby in their uniform, so that it sides on the emotion of Sidney Crosby and it sides on the emotion of the Montreal Canadiens. But there's so many factors. We talk about finances and logistics and emotion, and there's others as well. So it's a really complicated trade to make, and you're talking about potentially the biggest name in NHL in the last 30 years. There was Gretzky, Crosby, and now there's McDavid, but still Crosby he's won everything. He's that pinnacle player, and they don't get traded very often. Gretzky get traded a bunch, but still, we're unlikely to see McDavid or Crosby, or McDavid to get traded for a long time. Crosby's been in the league more than a decade. He has never been traded, so it's not impossible, but it's just not super plausible in most situations. But we might be coming up on a plausible situation here soon. So overall, no, I don't think this trade is going to happen soon. But it may happen. It's not impossible. It does make sense from a lot of perspectives. So I'll put this rumor to bed for now for this year. If it happens, that's great. If it doesn't, no big deal. I would like to revisit it though. If it does not happen, if the trade doesn't happen, I'd like to revisit in a year and see what's progressed on both sides, see what Pittsburgh's stance is on the situation, see what Montreal's stance. Maybe things, the wheels fall off in Montreal some part of the season, and next year they look and they think, let's bring in a guy who can really lead up front, because I don't know if Montreal has that right now. So maybe Sidney Crosby is that answer. Maybe they give up more than they technically should to bring that player in. So who knows? Let's revisit in a year. Thanks, guys, for watching. I appreciate it. I would love your feedback down below. Do you think this trade could happen sooner rather than later? Or do you think maybe it's, we're a couple of years out? Would love to know your feedback and your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're new, please hit the subscribe button. I released a bunch of ranking videos recently that were a lot of fun. We did locker rooms, we did jumbotrons or score clocks. We looked at some jerseys. Coming up on the channel, we're doing all 48 alternate jerseys in the Adidas years. That's going to be a huge ranking. We're doing the inside of the arenas this year with the no fans setup. We're doing some custom shoulder patches designs, some jersey concepts. We're looking at some NBA City jerseys, some rugby stuff, some more baseball minor league logos, get back into the jersey history rankings as well for every single team. So there's a lot of really exciting things coming on the channel from my perspective. I'm really looking forward to doing them, and I would love to have you aboard if you're new. So thanks, guys, for watching. I appreciate your time today, and I'll catch you in the next one. Adios.